Welcome to the Regeneration podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Griggs. Visit www.theregeneration.co to learn more. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Griggs. I'm the host of the Regeneration podcast, and today alongside me I have Eric from Deep Roots Living Soil. Thank you for joining me.
Yes, sir, man. Pleasure to be here.
So I guess really to get started, because I know you briefly were starting to share right before we hit live, but mentioning that you're a second generation composter because your father started that. And so just want to take it back to that and just hear more on that.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, we're based in Northeast Ohio, Cleveland area. Um, I grew up not really in the farm world at all, or not really appreciating as much as I should have what my dad started. But it all started in 2002. Uh, my dad was diagnosed with ALS disease, and at that point, he was working in hotel and hospitality, completely different world. And because of his health issue, kind of turned a 180 and started to get into the compost world. He saw it as a way to, you know, get into the soil, get back to the earth, and so uh, I lived a life. I was a filmmaker and a film director before this, and ever since COVID, I moved back home and learned to appreciate what he started much more, and realized it could be more of a viable vocation for myself and my family. So um, the idea came to take what he's already done, all of the infrastructure, because we have a lot of machines and a lot of land here, and essentially create, in addition, a new brand that's going to speak to a new generation of growers.
I'm curious then too with your father, what do you know what made him start learning about composting in particular, especially given you're
Yeah.
saying he was in hospitality? Because there's got to be some huge.
Oh
I
yeah.
know I know the ALS thing is definitely a big wake up call, but I'm curious. Was there a book or something that just made him start thinking about that?
So yeah, this was the time period where, and it, his mom, my grandmother died. He had a divorce and was hit with this ALS diagnosis. It was pretty brutal. He started dating and then quickly remarried, and him and his wife Michelle, my stepmother, one day were at an office or somewhere, and they saw on the TV screen this advertisement with Martha Stewart in it, and it was this advertisement for this mulch is called Sweet Pete out of Connecticut, and she was doing a testimonial about it, how it's good for recycling horse stable and turning it into this all composted mulch. And he saw the advertisement and wrote down the phone number and gave these guys a call. They're based out of Connecticut, like I mentioned, and so from that point, he realized he could start a franchise in Ohio, and he just got. It's kind of like when you get an idea, you just run with it. He had this idea and he just ran with it. He knew, um, being positioned in Northeast Ohio, there's a culture of horse racing with the Thistledown track. It's called the Racino, and so there's actually a very interesting history in Cleveland and Northeast Ohio tied to horses in general, and that kind of goes back to the Gilded Age and even the Rockefellers. That's how they got around town and were even racing them in downtown Cleveland for fun. But that culture stuck around, and so you can't do the kind of you can't create Sweet Pete, which is a horse bedding derived material, in just anywhere in the country. But we were positioned well to do it, and so yeah, he took a chance and got this 27-acre property, and over time developed the product, defined, yeah, kind of figured out how to make it and sell it. And so um, what's really interesting is that around this time in 2002, mulch was kind of seen as, ew, mulch, kind of smells bad. It's on playgrounds and it's full of dyes. But it was hard to initially sell people on it because it wasn't, we were no longer looking at it as a commodity. This was a premium product. So I think he was kind of early adopter to the whole organic movement. And eventually over time it became the go-to mulch and kind of compost from Cleveland to Columbus is our area.
Hmm, that's wild. That's not what I would have expected at all.
Yeah,
But
Martha
that's why
Stewart.
this is why I love though agriculture as a whole, and why I have this podcast is just no one's similar story at all. It's how people have started or what led them to starting something like that. I mean, that's why I started Regeneration was the family stuff I went through, but then also doing all the traveling and then actually talking to farmers and realizing everything and it all. But I don't know, that's pretty wild. So I guess then for you, whenever he started that and whatnot, did he try to get you involved with everything or
Yeah, I mean, he tried at this point. I was maybe 10 years old, 11, 12, 13, and my two older brothers and I and our step siblings would work there in the summer. You know, he had his full time guys there. We were younger, and quite honestly, growing up, I was just more concerned with like learning how to kickflip and like playing in a punk rock band. Like I was
yeah,
just so like it, I wouldn't say it was so divorced from it, but I just never thought of it as like something for me to get my hands into. I always loved like we had go karts and we would like have dirt bikes and ride around here. But yeah, eventually in high school, um, we had this job. So we have a trommel machine
what's
that
that?
it essentially is you dump all of the compost into this giant machine that sifts out the plastic from the horse stables
Mm,
and some of the horse needles, just any of the debris. And on the other end, it's this long stick with like a rubber conveyor that shoots up like 60 feet high and then creates these tall mounds of mulch. And we have that covered in a coverall, right? So one end of it of the trommel is shooting out and dispersing the end product, this big mound of mulch, and then the other is basically just all of the debris and garbage. And our job in high school, 100 degrees out in the middle of August, was to pick out the trash and the garbage and like throw it out and kind of clean up all of the trash area. So it was super sweaty, and I kind of, you know, got that dirty job experience of just kind of like literally cleaning up the debris around it. You know, I was too young to really drive the loader and the dozer and the excavator and whatnot, but that was my experience. Was really just kind of limited, just in high school, helping out.
yeah.
And so I wasn't able to really get my hands on the machines. And then I went to college and then moved away up until COVID time when I moved back home.
Yeah, that's what I was curious too, because you said you were 10, and given your father's background before that, I feel like that'd be kind of tough to convince a 10-year-old any of that. Because I mean, that's why I asked you. I had the same thinking. I was outside playing sports all the time, or video games or whatnot. And if someone tried to push that on me at 10 years old, even if I knew deep down, like long term, that probably it's hard. So I'm curious. Then you said COVID after that brought you back. Was it because of COVID, or what exactly brought you back, and what led you to becoming the second generation, not sixth?
Sixth generation one day maybe. But yeah, what led me back was really, yeah, I think the the pandemic was a paradigm shift for so many people, myself included. I really kind of woke up to where my food was grown and just felt very disempowered before, and I realized I thought this was providing better soil and better food was a way to kind of decentralize and equip people with something, just something to kind of rebel against all of the crap that we were faced up against and still are. And the discussion really came spontaneously to me, talking to my father about, hey, maybe I could. What's your future? Because his health, I mentioned he had ALS. It's a strange form of ALS called PLS, in which he has stabilized. ALS typically wipes somebody out within 3 to 4 or 5 years, but still, he's handicapped and his health is, he's an older dude. approaching 70, and the question became, what's your legacy? Are you going to want to continue the business or sell it? And um, I just was curious about that because Sweet Pete is this franchise, and we're only really we have bags and we have bulk, but you can't ship the product. And technically, our limitation is Cleveland to Columbus, Ohio. And so why spend the next 10, 15, 20 years of my life trying to scale a company or a business that doesn't have that much room to grow? We still want to keep that going, and we still are. But this idea came that we should start a new brand. We should like use the compost that we have and create some soil amendments, or we should do some worm castings. And so that was the kind of aha moment is we have this amazing business model where over 3,000 local horses, we get the material from them, from these horse stables. They pay us to haul it out. So we have a really good infrastructure, a good business model, and an abundant of, I guess you could call it leftover compost that we don't sell through because we have so much. Um, so that really sparked this idea of what could we do, and the idea was to um, start a new brand, renovate our pole barn, and feed earthworms our compost. And that's kind of the foundation of the new brand is using our compost to feed earthworms and create worm castings.
I'm curious then too. You were saying just talking to your father about the plan and everything. Did your siblings have any interest in this too? Because I know that's another very polarizing topic that the consumers might not know fully is passing on the farm or ranch. I know this is a little bit different, but that's very challenging even if you're fifth, sixth generation farmer because you might have four plus kids. Multiple might want to ranch and farm. Others still want the some inheritance of whatnot, and that can lead to a lot of problems. I think it was the Abbott family ranch, um, or there's just a massive ranch that was just put for sale for I believe $55 million, and that's
Oh my
because they
God.
couldn't come to an agreement on everything, so they just had to split that off. And so I was just curious to hear about that process with your father.
Yeah, our position, it's not nearly as hard as other stories I've heard that just kind of break your heart. And I do think our generation, our parents, boomers, our generation are just so divorced of this sort of through line of our ancestors and passing on something good. That's what I want to do for my kids, and that's something thankfully um, my father and my parents were are willing to do with us. Like we have to provide for that. They're footing the bill in terms of investing it in it, but um, it's our responsibility to see it through. And I couldn't do it without my family, and that includes my older brother Evan. So I'm the youngest. I have a middle brother, and then the oldest is out in DC. He's doing crazy manufacturing and a whole nother world. So he's living his life, and he's got his own path, and that's wonderful. And he consults with us and gives us good advice. But no, I hired and brought in my brother, um, one of his best friends, and even my uncle. So right now we've grown, but it's all family, if not family friends. So yeah, that's just within the last year, um, and that's been very very beneficial in a way because my older brother Evan actually had much more experience than I had, and now he's running a lot of the machines outside. He's running the excavator and the loader and actually making the compost, and I'm just sitting in the office all day, and they pick on me. So it's a family affair still.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think before really diving into all that too and the actual operation of everything you're going on, I've briefly talked about composting on my podcast, but would just love to really talk about composting 101. Like, what
Yeah.
exactly is it, and why it's such a hot or why it's a very important piece of the puzzle of agriculture and soil fertility and just all the whole system. Composting is a very common word that I think most consumers have heard, but I don't think most understand what it actually is.
That's a great question. And I could speak on it more so with what we're doing, but
Yeah.
no, it's simply just taking taking organic matter, breaking it down over time in different techniques to create more bioavailable soil or compost. Um, if you look online, yes, there's many DIY ways of doing it, but we've kind of prefer and become expertise in what's called thermophilic composting. So that's really essentially getting a lot of material and packing it in a way where it's cooking the material to this certain temperature. It's around 130, 150. And what that is doing is creating this kind of microbial powerhouse where these beneficial bacteria, fungi are reproducing. And believe it or not, meanwhile, a lot of pathogenic bad guys are killed in that process. So what you have, and this happens over the course of 6 months, right? It's mellowing out. It's going from, raw bedding, which is 80% wood shavings, 10% roughly horse manure and urine, which is a very integral part to the decomposition process. And then 5-10 roughly the remaining portion is straw and hay. And when you see that in the before and when you see that in the after 6 months, it's completely different. It goes from this kind of tannish, brownish, bulky material down to this super refined kind of chocolatey compost. It's breaking down. And again, we really prize ourselves in that, we can move the process along, but Mother Nature does need time. So the more time that we let it mellow out, the pH is kind of coming down a little bit. Everything can mellow out, and then it's more bioavailable. It's easier for the worms to eat because not all compost is created equal. A lot of people can have horse manure, throw that on their garden, and it will just burn everything because it's just not mellowed out. It hasn't broken down yet. It might not have the right carbon to nitrogen ratio. So, I mean, that's simply kind of what it is. It's just breaking down this material and adding life, the biology back into the soil. And again, that's really kind of our niche is biology. And if we bring it back to kind of soil health, there's these different pillars of soil health. There's the structure, there's the food, the minerals, and then the biology. And so that's fungi and bacteria and microbes. And so this thermophilic composting method is booming with fungi and bacteria. And the beautiful thing is what we've noticed is feeding our worms, our nightcrawler worms, this compost, our fungi and bacteria levels, which are what you're looking for with worm castings, is the biology, are nearly doubled what you're finding with other producers who are just taking inside secret. They're taking material often from peat bogs, which that's not regenerative at all. And it's fine. It has so much life. It has life in it, but it's not going through this kind of thermophilic process, in my opinion. And so what we're noticing is that it's very charged. It's very full of life. And that's kind of the composting method. And that's kind of what excites us about feeding our earthworms our compost.
So you mentioned the term worm casting. What does that mean?
Worm castings is simply just worm poop. So we have this horse manure kind of based compost. So you have think about it, you have all of these microbes, you have all of this life. It's going through the horse's system, extracted out their butts, and we take it, process it, and then feed it to worms. Worms are like the soil engines. They're create aeration, they're breaking down material. So it's kind of like this double distilled process, right? And to answer your question, yeah, worm castings are simply what worms leave behind. So they are amazing in this regard that by eating whatever's in their way. They're pretty resilient. They can eat through paper and cardboard and other fecal matter and dirt in general. But they're the kind of worm castings that you get are kind of as good as you feed them, right? Just kind of like human health. So
Hmm.
yeah, they eat they eat the material and it's being passed through their gizzard where it's broken down, and there's these enzymes and these liquids within their stomach that kind of process it and excrete out worm castings, which are very beneficial for many reasons, but also that process, by breaking it down, creates this very gentle amendment or product at the end. And so worm castings are very low in the NPK. They're very gentle, yet kind of slow releasing nutrition and beneficial for plants. So they're practically good for any type of plant.
Hmm. And then for the actual feces too, because I know we hear about with cows, in part of the regenerative cycle and how their manure is so beneficial for the soil. What exactly about the feces of worms that's so beneficial? Because that's
Microbes.
even just hearing that, like it's just funny.
It's hilarious, dude. It's we say we're number one in the number two business, so it's all about poop and waste. But I mean, yeah, I think back again when I was a child and appreciating this, but not really understanding it. And now I'm founding this new brand and raising earthworms, and I have this whole different attitude and kind of perspective on it. Where it's truly like alchemy. They're taking shit and turning it into gold. It's black gold. The castings are super rich in microbes. Again, the biology. These microorganisms that are feeding plants essentially. So that's what they leave behind is tons of microbes, beneficial bacteria, fungi, enzymes, the good guys.
I see. And then so, because I know if you, for the listeners, if you go to his website, it would show a couple products. One of them being the night crawler, as you were mentioning. Do you work directly with farmers and ranchers, or do they just buy the product and then just go with it and do their own thing, or is it
Yeah,
all?
it's a good question. So last 23 years with sweet pea, classically horticulture product. Like that's just been our lane is garden centers and landscaping. So we have 1.5 cubic foot of sweet peat. That's it. And then we sell in bulk locally. So we've really opened up kind of, and as I mentioned, we're kind of restrained from Cleveland to Columbus, Ohio. I'm incredibly keen on expanding the reach, and that's part of the excitement with Deep Roots is that we are working with houseplant, like specialty houseplant stores, because it's designed for indoor and outdoor. And then all the way to right now, a cannabis farm in Michigan is taking a super sack of the castings to try out. So I have a lot to learn in this department, but we have a lot of mouths to feed. And what I want to do is empower people to grow better houseplants or better raised beds, all the way to small, medium farms. And the way to do this is probably not by just spreading vermicompost or worm compost because it's very expensive, but there's a technique of using liquid extracts. So you're taking a handful of worm castings, diluting it with water, and creating aeration for about 24 hours. And this is used as a spray. And it by this process of aerating the castings, it's multiplying the biology in there like crazy. So like I mentioned, you can dilute that and use this as somewhat of a foliar spray, and you can't overdo it. There's a lot of infrastructure that goes into that, and I am incredibly excited about learning more about it. I've experimented with it ourselves, and I'm looking forward to seeing some results this season with some growers. But that's kind of our vision is to kind of, yeah, this middle road of horticulture, garden centers, of course, but people are growing so differently now. They're like there's this whole other lane which is isn't really what, the regenerative agriculture movements over here, but then there's this, house plant and houseplant culture and houseplant um, industry, as well as raising our own food and regen agriculture. Like there's just so much room to grow in, and we just started really launching within the last 2 months of the new brand. So excited to kind of see where things take off.
You mentioned landscaping too, and I don't know how much of that, because that's one thing that I think about a lot. So I've lived in Austin, Texas for a while, and the house I'm renting at, the front yard, I mean, the Texas climate's very dry, and the front yard of my house rarely grows grass year round. And whenever it rains, because the dirt soil is so bad, there's just weeds everywhere,
Hmm.
just really dry patches. And like I test it out a lot now to where I just have a hose and just watch what happens to the grass as I'm just torching it, and it just runs off, and then all of a sudden is just barren land and a bunch of fire ants that just come out, and that's
Yeah.
all that's there right there. And then I think about just how we are culturally from a landscaping perspective, to where it's got to look all pristine, the same, not most likely non-native grass,
Hmm.
all kinds of sprays, obviously, to just kill any type of insects and weeds. And so landscaping is just another industry that's just been completely torched. And I'm hoping that as this movement of more self sovereignty with growing even little gardens and whatnot, that we can also incorporate that into the landscaping. Because I was actually in LA this past weekend, and the one thing above all else I've noticed about LA when walking through neighborhoods is the diversity of the yards. I mean, also the houses as well and the architecture, but the yards specifically, you'll find one to where there's just all kinds of trees and bamboo and beautiful flowers, and you can smell it, and then the next yard is completely different,
Hmm.
and then yada yada. And I wish we could go back to that somehow, to where, because it changes also just how I was, I'm trying to even best explain this, my mood just walking through that is so much better, because again I could smell, even the Airbnb I stayed at, the neighboring yards had citrus trees, and I forgot another other fruit tree. It just smelled so amazing, even though I was in Venice Beach surrounded by homeless and all kinds of other madness that's happened in LA now. And so I'm curious then, with everything you're doing too, just kind of spitballing here, can you see ways of what you're doing to help out, bringing landscaping back to some type of that? I don't know. I know I'm kind of all over the place, but it really made me think about landscaping in America, because that's such another massive problem.
Oh my gosh, my mind goes in so many places with that. I think I think for me and what we're building, I think beauty is a really important component, and I think beauty has kind of been bastardized and erased in the West in so many ways.
Oh yeah.
And you can feel it. It is truly a spiritual feeling, and it's just an easy feeling when you're by a beautiful native garden. You feel the energy around you, and I read something this morning that even just be like your eyes seeing a the the plant or any plant is it's a mood enhancer. So
Yeah.
like
I
we
mean,
are
that's what
so, yeah,
I
we're
was just
so
gonna add real.
divorced.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna add real quick too. That's why you also see like the elite, really nice mega mansions. They always have impeccable landscaping and just beautiful gardens and courtyards and everything. And like you're saying, it adds so much to that.
I see. I was listening to a podcast with Matt Powers this morning as well, and he had a gentleman on talking about this, and who was kind of a regenerative landscaper in a way. I just clicked it. I don't know his name, but he was kind of saying that it's kind of an ego thing. It's like when you drive by my house, you're gonna see my nice Kentucky grass like cut, and to me it's just kind of sad. And I don't know. I see a lot of people waking up and kind of like changing their mind because some people may just not know like that there's another option for, you know, native plants. Like you talk to the average person about anything we're talking about, they have no idea what we're talking about. But you tell them about it and you kind of go like, "Oh, you could throw some I don't know, even some like clover or something down or kind of do like some native plants and it'll be beautiful and attract bees." And they go, "Oh really, like are the bees going to sting me?" No, they're just going to like make your flowers even happier and create this lovely environment. And so no, I am critical of that because it really does go to the whole it goes to the whole fertilizer discussion that we have in the regen ag world. It is even more so in landscaping. And a big rain comes and that is flooding. We have a we have a pond on our location here and it's kind of downstream of the road. And I see these yards and I see guys spraying Roundup. And I'm like, I don't know if I can fish in my pond. Like where is this coming from?
There was a
And
well, that's important too to before you because I actually read an article today mentioning how trees are getting decimated in the Midwest from herbicide spray from other fields. Not even they're not even
yeah.
spraying it.
Oh, Ohio is, you know, soy, wheat, it's
Oh
big
yeah.
here.
Sorry, I know I interrupted. I didn't know if you had anything else to add. That was my fault.
No, man, we need to make landscaping beautiful again. That's all I was gonna say. Make landscaping beautiful again.
So I'm curious then too, in terms of because it just requires a massive just paradigm shift for for our food too, but something like landscape because that's why culturally it did happen to where now you have to have the pristine yard. Uh, I mean, people have HOAs and they take that just wherever that goes. But even just like having a garden bed and whatnot, I don't know. It just has to be collaborative and more engaging. That's why it just gives me ideas too on making just cool videos with whatever you're doing too to because we're so online now, and so there's got to be ways too to show how this could work too. Again, I'm just spitballing here. That just made me think about just the world of landscaping and beauty too, because there's all of that is interconnected. It's meant to inspire, uh, calm you down as well, because that's the first thing that happens too when you go to any type of nature garden. It's just immediate, but then also provides food and fuel for yourself. And to me, that's also why it's been completely decimated by design. Is all of the beauty and sterilization of everything. Um, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's just interesting where we're at culturally with not just our food, but now just landscaping, gardens, and all of that.
Yeah, you're kind of making me think about it even more, and it's making me want to look into it more. And to me, I mean, I'm guilty of being online or just scrolling and oh crap, maybe I haven't like been outside for a couple days, and then you enter a garden or you go for a walk and you're like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to feel. Like we don't know how good we're supposed to feel.
That's why above all else, I will nonstop saying go visit a farm because of that. You just don't realize until you do. I mean, that's what happened to me. I've said it in a lot of my podcasts. Just after my brother died, the first thing I did was go outside and get on walks. I mean, I was doing nothing with my life because I quit my job and whatnot, and I was destroyed. But I made sure during the day when it was sunny out in Texas, I would go outside, sit my ass in a park, um, and now looking back, that was literally the best thing I could do because now that's hard ingrained in me. And since then, I worked on farms and whatnot, and so now being outside, if I don't go outside, I start losing my mind
Yeah.
essentially. But that's just how we've always been. We've always spent majority of our time outdoors. This is the first time in the history of humanity to where it's flipped it on its head. And not just that, now we're the most disconnected from our food. And to me, that's all connected as well. And so that's why I push to go visit a farm or ranch because then you see the system at play, but then you also finally get to talk to the people that are actually growing the food for yourself. And so it just might not seem like much, but it really you need to do is take that initiative, and you might not have any idea where that could lead to.
I totally agree. And that's something you do mention on your podcast that I have taken to heart, I guess, or kind of inspired me more and more to do. So, uh, seeking out, all right, where can I find like the best raw milk? Where can, and it, again, being positioned in Northeast Ohio, we have two of the top four largest Amish communities in the nation. And so, I mean, gosh, they are a wealth of knowledge for soil health. And they're, from what I can tell, pretty transparent people and raise animals well and respect animal husbandry and have amazing farms and products. So that's something that I feel blessed by, and I'm very curious to kind of explore even more with, because it's like a whole nother world just in my backyard. But in addition to that, with Deep Roots, we have Nightcrawler, which is our worm casting product, and then we're launching this other kind of soil amendment mix called Soil Reviver. It's kind of like your all-in-one supplement for your soil, adding life back to depleted dirt. And one of the ingredients in it is biochar, which is like this form of pure carbon. And we source it from this company, Ohio Valley Biochar, which is an Amish guy in
Hmm.
Holmes County. And I will send this guy an email and it's faxed to him and he gets it. And so I just think this is a fun little anecdote, but yeah, like meet your farmers. Went out to meet him about an hour south of us. I'm rolling up, with my Subaru, and I just see the horse and buggy. Like, oh, here, this must be Melvin. And so, yeah, I think there's so much to explore, and then getting to meet him, he's the most knowledgeable person I've met in this realm, and I feel blessed about that. I feel blessed that we do have this community here, and um, I don't know where I'm going with that besides just kind of wanting to express that, but yeah, it's making me seek out. I think even again through guys like you and what you're doing, making me seek out even more, like actively going to farmers markets, checking out like where my food is grown, and I could spend the rest of my life doing that, of like trying to even raise some of my own food, of finding the best steak I can, like eggs, like it's it's just such a wholesome and cool lifestyle.
See, I love hearing that too, because I realize a lot of people don't think long term at all whatsoever, and fortunately my brother instilled that into me at an early age to even consider that. And so even just hearing you say, thinking more on going to farmers markets, but just talking more, if we want to have this food system changed for the better, if we want to have our agriculture changed for the better, it's got to be collaborative. And so the stuff that you're doing now, and potentially talking to others, you have no idea where that could lead to, and not you might not see the benefits of that until 40 years down the road, or it might not even be until your future children see that. And so that's what I try to get people to understand too, is start the conversations now with the farmer, because you have no idea what this is going to look like in 50 years. And the more we have these collaborations, the more ideas are shared around, the more you can find other people that you need to find, or that vice versa, they find you. And then that's really how we can get this ball rolling, because it's very siloed on all fronts. That was one of the reasons why I had Regeneration, was noticing that, because farmers are already siloed, but then they also silo themselves. There's not just farmers and ranchers in agriculture. There's people doing policy and law and consulting. And so those people can be siloed in its ways. And then obviously the consumers, we are the most siloed it's ever been from our food. And so it's going to take a lot to really, really change. And again, it's a paradigm shift, because it's not just what we do, but how we think about it all. It's completely different.
Yeah, it's encouraging again to see people like Joel Salatin and John Kempf and people like yourself who are being a voice, marketing this to the world. Um, Even Nicole Shanahan, and it's there's you can sense it. I think within the last year or two or longer for other folks who've been at it for a while, but it feels like there is this door that has opened, and it's you never know when that door is going to close. You never know because everything is cyclical. If I look back to the history of farming and agriculture, you know, something I've learned from Louis Bromfeld, who's a very interesting figure from Ohio. He kind of came up before World War II when it was like there was a dairy farm next door. Everybody had local produce. Like there wasn't these giant conglomerations yet. All right, post the war comes, we have a lot of people to feed, and fertilizer drops in the 50s. And now we went through this cycle. And then there was a huge backlash with like environmentalism in the 70s where it's like humanity's a cancer and we're destined to ruin everything. But kind of going back to this Louis Bromfeld perspective where it's like we can take from this side, we can take from this. We can be stewards of the soil. We should be stewards to animals. Like we have we are unique creatures, let's be real. And I think it is our responsibility to honor creation and honor the food that we eat, and that all does start with the soil. So kind of going back to what I was saying before is like this door is opened, and I feel like we're kind of coming back to this moment that we were, I don't know, 100 years ago or something maybe, where people are aligned. People of all different groups are aligning, and you never know where that's going to go. I mean, even within the movement, it's like exciting, and then it's like, oh god, and it's like, it's this coalition, but it's not either. And I think it's really going to take responsible, diehard, interesting, creative people to continue to kind of get the right message out there. And I don't know, man, I'm super white pilled. I'm like so optimistic with what's going on, and maybe that's because I force myself to be, because I'm literally starting this new business and I have no room for failure. And it's just like, yeah. But in, in talking to even everyday folks, I think that's where we make change. Is like, yeah, we have these niche audiences, but there comes this tipping point where you reach X amount, and then that's all you need in order to have regenerative agriculture be a dominant force, or for it to take over the paradigm, or just people's sense of how life is again. And yeah, I think I am encouraged by the fact that it's very possible, and it's just going to take microphones and like yours and audiences to be willing to listen, I guess. So it's a huge thing, and it's right now, it's like, yeah, I do feel like a black hole is opened, and because you never know when that this, I won't call it a trend, but when this era may close or something, it's just very like motivating to get after it.
Completely agree. And I think yesterday or 2 days ago really helped change that for me too in a lot of ways. So the Maud family, I've talked about that, shared online with this ranching family in South Dakota, to where they were six generational ranchers, and I believe they've had it since before 1910. And then all of a sudden last year, they got an anonymous complaint from a hunter saying that their fence line is it was over the National Forest Service, which is also the funniest part of all this. Is this fence line has been in existence with the Maud family since before the National Forest Service even existed, but that's besides the point. So they got this anonymous tip or complaint, And then all of a sudden they're told that their fence line, yeah, is they should move that. But they've complied about everything. They've awesome ranch family. They're just supporting for themselves and their community. And then you learn that later on there's a lot of corruption in the background with NGOs and the National Forestry Servicery, but they essentially forced them to be under a gag order. Each were facing up to 10 years in prison, $250,000 in fines. Within 90 days of that first complaint, they had folks show up in tactical gear, just all kinds of intimidations and threats. They even said something on Second Amendment, which was just really, I really hope that these folks get not the Maud family, but whoever was behind this gets uh, just massive corruption. But all of social media caught wind of this, as well as a lot of awesome folks like Shad Sullivan, a rancher. Some I forgot her name, but she works in Wyoming's Harriet. I'm blanking so hard, but she's awesome, and so many other people really got together and started pushing back and sharing all this online, and that started to work. So then, all of a sudden, 2 days ago, an awesome statement from Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins saying that they've dismissed the case, and on top of that, they started this new portion on their website to where if any farmers and ranchers are facing any type of BS from their local governments and whatnot, to apply through that. And
Hmm.
that was talk about white pill because
Oh.
they Tom Vilsack was awful the previous one, and the USDA has been corrupted for some time, and it was tough to see what was going on with Brooke Rollins. They were doing some good things, but still at the same time, it felt like that they were more of the same with Big Ag. But then Tuesday rolled around, and that really shifted because seeing her talk, and then having the Maud family there, and hearing them talk, and then on top of that, starting that site to where you can apply for that. That would have not happened had people not gotten behind and shared online, and that just really showcases that. And that's why I try to reiterate that too, that it works. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of hands to share, but the awareness piece is so crucial because people don't realize that this is going on everywhere. And again, this family will almost faced it at $500,000 and then 10 years in prison. They have two children, I think one on the way, but two really early children, so they would have had to see their parents gone for something they didn't do. Again, the last thing I want to iterate on that, they had that fence line in their property before the National Forestry even existed. And so that moving forward gives me a lot of hope, knowing that sharing online and really speaking out can help, and it does work. And so I'm hoping as that moves on time and time that more and more people wake up, more and more people want to help and support actual farmers and ranchers. Because again, it's if we want the food system to work long term, how we want it to be, it's going to be up to us because the government will make changes as they have with the food dyes and whatnot, but you have to apply pressure,
Hmm.
or else because we don't know behind closed doors what's going on. Again, with especially with the USDA and FDA, clearly there's been corruption forever, and they are doing ways to fix that, but from us, we have no idea what's going on.
Mm.
And so what we can do is what we've been doing is supporting the actual farmers and ranchers and sharing information online that needs to be shared.
Dude, my heart goes out to that family. I I'm trying to process what you're saying and focus on what you're telling me without having this like emotional reaction of like how would I respond to that?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with what you're saying, and in my head, I'm so emotionally charged thinking about that and thinking about my intention to start a family soon and having kids, and all you're trying to do is be a provider, and there's just this antagonistic mechanism thrown at you that's just it's just so corrupt, and it's like how do you stay calm in that? And I think it's just because it's the only option. But my God, man, it is a lesson in also of what you said earlier about it takes time, and it is going to take time. We're very eager and hyped up on on what's happening now, and it is encouraging, and we should celebrate the wins that we do get. And I am celebrating banning red dye, but these are like bread they're breadcrumbs. Like this is like a good little start, but okay, that's like the tip of the iceberg. Like there's so much more. And in my mind, if they're just if they're just giving these little headlines and these things to us, it's like disguising against all of what they should be doing. And that 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 kind of illuminates the story that you just told. Those kind of stories, like whatever is being in vaccines, like whatever that is, we need to know what is being in our bodies, whether it's food, whether it's anything like that. Like, and no, it gets me incredibly animated, man. And it just yeah, I don't even know how they would handle that. And I'm so glad that, the action that people are taking and spreading the word is having an impact, because sometimes it doesn't, but it's showing right now that, you know it's get the right people together, keep fighting good fight, and good things will happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, for every story with the Mount family, there's all kinds of other stories to where they didn't get the help that they needed and deserved. For example, I had early on in my podcast Three Shepherd's Cheese, the Felice family, and her name is Linda. And this started back in the '90s, and then I believe it was the mid 2010s to where it finally ended. But essentially, they had they imported sheep from Europe, and they were starting to make cheese. But then essentially, the government did what they love to do, and they made them the scapegoat. And the whole point of it was to get funding from Congress to build a $450 million facility in Ames, Iowa, and it ended up working. I mean, I'm really skipping a lot. The folks should really go back and listen to that one because it's a great example of it was a little too late because she didn't learn about the actual massive corruption until later on. It was like 10 or 15 years later. They went to the showing of a documentary called Farmageddon, which they were a part of that. And because of that, then there was an official whistleblower that went and talked to them and actually explained the whole thing to her. But by then, they had already lost their whole farm, the whole operation. I mean, they eventually are now still making cheese and whatnot, but they went through absolute hell.
Hmm.
And no one really knew about it. And I mean, they didn't even really know what was going on, truthfully, until it was already over. And so that's again why I say to share that needs to be shared because why they attack the farmers and ranchers, they know that the self sovereignty aspect and what that leads to for the growing or the surrounding population too when you have good quality food. So they're obviously going to continue to attack that as they've attacked with everything else. And they also understand when I say they, the powers that be, the government institutions and the agencies, is that knowledge is power and the awareness is power. And so whenever people have no idea what's going on and they're distracted from everything else, they can do these incredibly illegal and just painful things like that. And it works. And they know that. And so they try to do this as much as possible. But again, it's up to the people to really push back. Because even going back, I've been reading more onto leading up to how America was formed, and it was a lot of farmers, and so their little
Hmm.
local communities in the Northeast, they could see what was the writing on the wall with Britain with land. So that the how the Boston Tea Party was over just a really small tax. If you look at the actual tax, it wasn't a big, massive percentage, like say 50%. But what a lot of people could see was if they implement that, then they're just going to continue to move the needle to eventually start taking the land. And so they understood that and they made coalitions and pushed back and fought. We need to do something very similar to that to where you're building decentralized networks and understanding the actual true motivations and goals of the people that are trying to take the land and going after farmers and ranchers. And when you can see that, then you can really I don't know, to me it drives more motivation to want to help out is whenever really understanding all of that and understanding how that can personally affect me and eventually affecting my future family. Um, because it really takes a village with all of this.
Yeah, I agree. I'm right there with you, man. It's yeah, I think history is so fascinating, and we're just, what do they say? Species with amnesia. It's so true, and it's 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 correct in what you said. Like, our nation started with, so like, agriculture is the roots of the United States. If we look at the people that you described in the Northeast, they came to the Northwest Passage in Ohio to Illinois and beyond because their soils weren't that fertile. So the Western Reserve are folks from Connecticut area that moved to Northeast Ohio specifically. It was called the Western Reserve. And they came here because they were seeking fertile soil. It was too rocky in the Northeast. Like, this is the genesis. It's so fundamental. And you're talking sovereignty, and my mind goes to, we need to grow our own food too. And the burden shouldn't be on us, and life gets busy. I understand this, but grow some of your own food, experience it, because there's nothing more divine than that. There's nothing more sovereign and intimate than feeding a seed and watching it grow and then eating it. Like, I think there should be even more discussion about that.
So let's actually talk about that then. This could be the final topic of discussion for people to say start their own little plot of gardening. Should they look into, say, like the nightcrawler worm composting you have?
Yeah, so all good food starts with living soil. Like, that's just the base of it. If we look at the nutrition of a carrot you buy at Aldi today, um, it has maybe 10% of the nutrition it did 100 years ago, right? And so the way that we have a conversation of food as medicine is bringing the nutrients back into the soil and having more fertile soil and more alive soil. So I believe that what we're doing is a component of that. Like, healthy plants can feed themselves in a utopia world, but it's, our soils are so degraded that we have so much remediation to do to get them to this, like, set them and forget them phase. Like, there is so much, and especially if you're growing in raised beds or just at your house, like in your backyard or wherever, you need to supplement. You need to get good soil and add biology into it. It's so fundamental. And so worm castings are amazing for that, because it's not only helping with nutrients. Plants have an immune system just like us. They are electrical, like with an antenna to the sun and energy, just like human beings. If we talk about non-native EMF and how that can ruin human beings, there's this whole other biophysics world with plants too. And so that's a whole nother tangent. But yes, I believe we're going to get back if we have better soil. And that's not only creating more yield or higher yield, right? It's better quality, and it's the health, it's the immune system, right? Getting that in a good place for the plant. And yeah, worm castings are amazing for that. And if your plant needs a little bit more, that's why we created this amendment called the soil reviver. It's our compost, there's worm castings, we have some of the biochar inoculated that I mentioned, and there's a bit of sphagnum peat. It's simply just to kind of balance the pH. But then we throw in humic acids and the mycorrhizae fungi. And mycorrhizae fungi is a whole other component to plant health. They've co-evolved over millions of years together, fungi and plants, right? So we're able to supplement and kind of feed that back into a plant with that product. But again, like, there's so much remediation that needs to be done. And I guess I would encourage people to you can test your soil. There's labs, and that's what we do. We try to we test all of our products and make sure we know what's getting in them. That's one way to do it, but again, it's just like food. It's what goes into it is what you're going to get out of it. If you're feeding it a name brand that has some fertilizer in it, are you going to feed that to your daughter? Are you going to feel confident about it? Like, does it smell aromatic like it should? Is the plant? It's like we don't know how good we're supposed to feel. We don't the plant. We don't know what a healthy plant even looks like, let alone taste. So that's something I'm very like. I'm so obsessed with learning how to measure and add nutrients back to plants, and I believe like we're not trying to change mother nature. It's just doing it the way mother nature has always done it and supplying what isn't there.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. And then for folks that might want to try composting themselves, how would you? Yeah, what would you be your recommendation for how they could go about that?
Well, I would try it with vermicompost. I think the whole DIY kind of composting, I've just haven't I've done it a little bit growing up. Even at my house we did it, but it's interesting with with food scraps. You know, there's a way to get like a compost bin, and you have to cycle it, and there's it's very worthwhile. I'm just really more focused on the raising of worms and doing the vermicompost, so I would touch on that. And I would look at on YouTube. There's a couple guys that are really informative on this, that are doing it in a way that's really approachable. Captain Matt, look up Captain Matt. Um, just very informative, and you can do it yourself. So yeah, empowering people. You can buy your own worms. You can find them online, and it's you got to get your carbon and your nitrogen and your food kind of ratio together. But it's kind of like growing a plant, where it's like it's okay to fail. Like, just try it out a little bit, and that's something you can do in a musty basement. Where composting is a little bit more like, yeah, it's a little bit more involved, like creating a compost bin. I would encourage people to do that. But with creating your own compost bin, again, you need to educate yourself, and you don't want to be throwing in like really acidic food or dairy or meat. So there's a lot to learn with that, but I'm just fascinated by worms in general, and I think that's a little bit more of like something people can just like invest in and just try on a small scale. And they can even make I encourage people to make try to make their own worm castings, like to use their own food scraps to do that. So um it isn't that difficult, but again, at scale, there's a lot that's important for us. It's all about feeding them organically. So I didn't get to mention this before, but yeah, we feed them our compost, but we're also feeding them this blend of all organic grain. It's from Minnesota. That's like soybean. There's alfalfa, wheat, some other barley and things, and there's a calcium source in there as well. Look into it. Just try it out, because worms are really like the engine of soil. And if people are excited about growing their own food or trying to learn more about composting, I would check out, yeah, Captain Matt on YouTube. That guy's awesome, and give it a try.
I love that. And I guess my final question then, because I know your father started this, but I'm just curious, how can I ask this? Because you're focusing on the composting side of things and just with the soil, what would be your favorite aspect of all of this as to why you just seem so passionate about it all?
$1 million question. Oh man, I think you mean, are you kind of asking like
Because well,
what would
like with
be?
like farmers and whatnot, or like ranchers, they could just be anything, just being out on the land or the actual animals. I'm just curious what is about everything you're doing that gets you up in the morning.
I think to me, it kind of goes back to why I got into this, and that was that it felt like a righteous vocation or endeavor, but it truly is a way, again, going back to sovereignty, growing our own food, having dirt in your fingers and touching the land, like having your bare feet on the ground, all of that. And for us being able to provide these natural soil products, it's equipping people with the means to feed their families and their neighbors. I think
I love
that's
that.
our goal. I don't know if we're
Yeah,
going to be super huge commercial. I would like to get into some farms and grow really amazing grapes and add biology to that world. And I want to do the houseplant world because, quite frankly, I think it's really cool too. It's a whole nother world. But like, just generally equipping people with options, another option, right? With the biology to feed their families and their neighbors. I mean, I, I I think I think that's just such a revolutionary idea, and it's a way to feel like you have, some sort of power amidst chaos.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining, Eric. I guess before we go, if there's any last things you'd like to say or, plug anything for the listeners, now would be a good time.
Yeah, for sure. My Twitter X is dude, what is it? It's Grow with Eric. I have like 100 followers, but I'm trying to get the word out a little bit more. And then follow us on Instagram. It's at We Grow Deep Roots, and our website is growdeeproots.com. That's where you can find us right now.
Sweet. And I'll make sure to plug all of that. Thank you again for joining me, Eric.
Dude, my pleasure. Thank you.
Visit www.theregenesancecode to learn more.